I hope you have your wine and your popcorn and you just got your feet up on your ottoman and you're just ready to dive into some depravity. He promises he won't diddle another kid again. Your Honor, diddling kids is out for him. We're not going to do that anymore.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And he's going to react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another creepy episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your board-certified criminal defense lawyer, here to talk to you about the former faith life leader, Tom Keesee, megachurch star.
I don't look the part.
He's accused of all kinds of criminal sexual conduct. And this is a case where he's got all kinds of victims and all kinds of allegations. We're going to get into it's in Ohio, and we're going to get into the indictment and news conference. And you're going to hear the name of the county, which is just, you can't make this shit up. You just can't make it up. So let's start just a little background. So there's a church in Ohio called the Faith Life Church. Let me tell you something about the ultra-religious. I love them. But they never are who they say they are. People who wear too much religion on their sleeve. You know, I'm a Catholic, okay? And I go to church, you know, not every Sunday, but, you know, pretty regularly. I like going to church, but I don't wear it on my sleeve and I don't push it on anybody else. The people in these mega churches, they get glossy-eyed and, you know, and then they give all their money to the pastor and, you know, can I spread my legs for the pastor too? I mean, fucking A. You know, and guess what these pastors do, or the leaders of these churches? Now, not every one of them, obviously. If the leader of the church is in a Falcon jet.
Again, getting back to the comment, you said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers.
I have a problem with that. I just fucking do, because little grandma's giving her hard-earned money, and then, we can give you a drop of holy water, tear water, and then we're going to put it in the mail to you if you send me $8,000. Give me a fucking break. Anyway, that's my little spiel on overly religious people. But they tend to also, I mean, do you remember Jimmy Swaggart, you know, and all the shit that in Tammy Faye, and, you know, they get a lot of power. And guess what happens when they get a lot of power? They get corrupt. And when you've had other religious sects that go crazy on sex too, and it becomes part of their cult. And now I'm not saying that that's part of this particular church. I don't know, but we do know that there's a lot of people who have fallen victim to this Tom Keesee. Keep in mind, these are not new allegations. I mean, they've newly surfaced, but they come from 2001 and 2000 to 2003. So how old? He's 36 now. How old was he back then? He was a minor himself. And the thing about these CRAM, he's facing 27 counts. 27 counts. And what the allegation is that when and some were as young as 5 years old. 5 years old. And the allegation is that he was grooming them, and then he sexually touched them, and some he had actual sex with. I'm telling you, you don't see women doing this shit. Fucking A. His bond was set at $2 million with GPS monitoring and no contact with the victims. He had to resign from his position at the Faith Life Church, good idea, church, and the investigation is ongoing. When you have this kind of prolific contact with people, guess what? More people come out of the woodwork. So I would suspect there are more counts, but he's pleaded not guilty to 27 counts, 11 of rape and 11 of gross sexual imposition, which it's just other kind of touching, and 5 of unlawful sexual conduct. During a hearing now get this, I don't know if I'm reading this right, but I'm just going to read this to you. This is from the Columbus Dispatch. Licking County prosecutors, acting as special prosecutor in this case, charged him with 2 counts of rape on April 18th before a grand jury indicted him with the other charges. So the neighboring county is Licking County? You can't make this shit up. Multiple women have alleged Keesee groomed them when they were minors into trusting him and then had sex with them. The indictment involves 3 victims who have come forward who were 6 to 15 years old at the time of the alleged abuse. Licking County Prosecutor Jenny Wells, I don't know if that means she's licking or the county is named Licking. I think it means the county is named Licking. I can't imagine she was licking during a press conference. But why don't we take a look at what his attorney has to say? You know, and guess what? When you're sitting next to somebody that's accused of all this shit, the first thing the jury is picturing is him doing this shit. I guarantee. It's like, what if I told you don't think of an elephant? What do? You immediately think of an elephant. Gary Thomas Tom Keesee Jr., son of New Albany megachurch founders, appeared in court for the first time on April 23rd, 2 days after a Knox County grand jury indicted him on nearly 30 criminal charges of abuse.
This case because he's wrongly accused.
Sam, alleged victims were juveniles, alleged...
This is what I don't do. I don't sit out in front of the courthouse and say, we're here to fight this case because he's been wrongly accused. Guess what? Hands down the road, you try a case and all of a sudden you lose. I guess he was rightly accused then? I mean, I just don't do that because you go out on a limb. You can't believe everything your client says.
Perpetrator was a juvenile. Does that add to the difficulty on either prosecution or defense?
That's a very good question. The answer is yes, it does, because we're talking about crimes that allegedly occurred as long as 2003. So we're talking 22 years ago, and I think the most recent, if I understand this document correctly, is 2011. Yes, I mean, it's difficult for everybody involved, right?
The problem with historical cases is they're very difficult to defend against. There's probably no physical evidence. There's no DNA. There's no nothing. And how do you recreate where you were when you were, 22 years ago from 2003?
You can imagine how hard it is as you ask, how are you going to disprove all of these allegations? Well, of course, it's the government's burden to prove them beyond a reason.
Prove to me you didn't speed on the way to work. How do you do that? You can't.
Doubt, but until we look at the statements and cross-reference the times and try to nail it down, who knows? These cases are fraught with difficulty for sure from both sides, or for both sides, I should say.
This could be jumping ahead. I know we just had the arraignment, but this is a small community. Are you worried about eventually finding a jury that hasn't heard about this case?
My experience, and I don't just practice in Columbus, is that jurors, once selected, follow the law. And if you follow the rules, you get the right result. And so I have no doubt that the citizens of this community can look through all the hoopla, all the BS, all the social media crap that's been spewed, and look at the facts of the case. Have these charges been proved beyond a reasonable doubt? That's the standard. And if the government's prepared to meet it, bring it on.
I do agree with that. I think juries, by and large, take a case seriously. And if you have a really high-profile case, you're going to want to probably move it if you can. Now, let's take a look at the indictment here. This is in Knox County, Ohio. I'm just going to read a couple of the accounts because they pretty much read the same. On or about the 31st day of May, 2002 to the 30th of May, 2003, in the county of Knox, state of Ohio, Gary Thomas Keesee Jr. did commit rape by engaging in sexual conduct with another who is not the spouse of the offender when the other person is less than 13 years of age, whether or not the offender knows the age of the other person. A felony of first degree, contrary to and in violation of section blah, 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 and contrary to the form of the statute in such case made and provided against the peace and dignity of the state of Ohio. And most of them say almost identical. So there's not really a whole lot of detail in these counts. There's 27 counts. Now, here's the thing. He was a minor when this stuff was going on. Well, I take that back. Because it goes to 2008, let's see, 2000, yeah, and I think there might be other charges that go to 2011. So 2011, he would have been an adult, and 2008 he would have been an adult. So when you look at this kind of case, first of all, you're going to have victim after victim after victim come up and say what he did to him way back when. So this jury is just going to be inundated with heart-wrenching testimony by people who said that they were 5 or 6 years old when this stuff was going on, that he groomed them And you might even have, now that it's out, people feeling free to come forward and say that it happened last week or it happened 5 years ago. So you might have, and then this pattern of conduct becomes so freaking powerful, it's almost impossible to overcome. Because guess what? Remember what I said about CRAM sex cases? There's 3 parties in a CRAM sex case. There's the rescuer, there's the perpetrator, and then there's the victim. And the rescuer is always the jury. And they're always going to want to protect a child, aren't they? Of course they are. And the trick is to make it so that you switch it, so that you are the victim and the accusers are the perpetrators, and the jury has to rescue you from the accusers. That's kind of the trick that you try to, how you try to frame a criminal sexual conduct case. The problem with a case like this is when you have multiple victims that probably know each other or don't know each other. People may or may not have talked, especially if they haven't talked and they come up with similar allegations. How everybody's lying? That's the issue that I have with these types of cases. So let's just kind of watch what the local news coverage has been about this.
We are following breaking news right now out of Knox County. More charges have been filed for the son of a New Albany megachurch pastor in connection to sexual abuse allegations. Gary Thomas Keesee Jr. is now facing at least 27 charges, including rape, gross sexual imposition, and unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. Keesee's case was just heard by a grand jury in Knox County. We are still working to learn the details about that grand jury indictment, but in the court document.
So you got 27 counts, 3 of the victims, with only 3 victims, so that's a positive, I guess. Fuck. But the problem is that they're all under 13. Under 13. That's what we call an aggravating factor.
Court documents we were able to obtain when he was arrested on Friday. There are a total of 3 victims, all under the age of 13. The first reports of abuse happened when Keesee would have been between the ages of 12 and 14. While Keesee left his position at the church last year, his parents, Gary and Brenda Keesee, are the lead pastors. An attorney for Faith Life Church sent us this statement about the arrest of Tom Keesee on Friday. They say the complaint alleges incidents that occurred 2 decades ago that in no way involved the church. They say Faith Life Church has cooperated with investigators. This case dates back to December last year.
Notice the news reporter didn't say what county it was. She completely doesn't say that. It's Licking County. Yeah, how do you have a criminal sexual conduct case in Licking County? I thought in Licking County anything goes.
Last year, when a report of alleged sexual abuse was filed in Knox County, but the Knox County Sheriff's Office had to recuse itself from the case due to a conflict of interest. The suspect's mom, Brenda Keesee, is a Knox County commissioner and signs the sheriff's budget. Per protocol, the case was then sent to Attorney General Dave Yost's office. But Yost says he has a personal friendship with Brenda and Gary Keesee and also had to recuse himself. That is how the Licking County Sheriff's Office was assigned the case then back in February. And today, their office, alongside the Licking County prosecutor, will have a joint news conference to talk about the investigation. We will have a crew at that news conference, and you can stream it live on our...
When you get charged with something, like a heinous act like this, it's embarrassing. First of all, most criminal sexual conduct type cases are in the dark. Right? They are behind closed doors. People get threatened. Don't tell anybody about this. If it's other kinds of stuff, you're isolated, right? So when it all of a sudden comes to light, people are judging you. Now let's take a look at his court hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor. Clinton J. Murphy, McKee County Assistant County Prosecutor, 0063519.
Thanks, sir. Thank you for being here. Mr. Szymanski. Your Honor, good afternoon, sir. Sam Szymanski on behalf of the accused, Mr. Keesee, who is seated to my right. Thank you. And sir, you, Gary Thomas Keesee.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
What do you think the fees for his defense lawyer are? They certainly over $100,000. I bet they got to be at least $250,000.
The black counsel to approach the bench, before we check. I have a couple of questions for you.
So the first thing that happens when you get an indictment and you make your first appearance, the judge asks if you want it read or do you want to waive reading, and then they set conditions of release. And this is where they set the bond.
So acknowledged, Your Honor. My client has been receiving the indictment for many days. I've explained the same to him, read it to him, waive a reading. And whenever the court is ready, we'll enter pleas of not guilty to all counts contained therein.
Right now, please.
Not guilty, Judge, on all counts contained therein. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so addressing the matter of bond, what does the state have to say about bonds? Thank you, Your Honor. The state would request $5 million, cash surety, no contact with victims, GPS monitoring, the bond is made.
Now, what are the issues for bail? The issues are risk of flight and danger to the public. Now, in this case, the most recent allegation is 2008 from the indictment that I saw. It might be 2011. But the other thing is the number of victims and the prolific nature of what happened makes the charge punishable by a shitload of fucking time. It's prison time, right? And that's one of the things that the court, takes into consideration as well. So you've got risk of flight, danger to the public, and maybe danger to himself too, because if all of a sudden you think that you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life, what are you going to do to yourself? I had a guy that just jumped off a bridge, because he saw the train coming. Not on the bridge, but he saw that he was going to potentially go to prison for 40 years. So the state here has asked for $5 million bond.
As well as surrender any passport. The request is based on 22 of these counts are classified as crimes of violence, and then it actually has.
Now, the counter argument is, Your Honor, he's got no criminal history. He's lived in this community his whole life, so he's not a risk of flight. He's hired me. He's invested in me, and I'm here to represent him. And he hasn't had any offenses since then that we know of.
Multiple properties in both the U.S. and Canada, and as well as apparently access to a private plane. Thank you. Thank you. And is there a victim advocate for him? Yes, Your Honor. All right. And the victim's present to hear the speech. Yeah, Your Honor. Then you know what you speak. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. And what does that have to say about that?
Your Honor, first and foremost, of course, I don't need to remind the court about bail in Ohio.
I love it when somebody, well, of course, I don't need to remind you of, and then they go into what they don't want to remind you of.
You understand it well. With respect to risk of flight, Judge, I'd like you to consider the following. These are facts. These aren't flights of fancy. My client does not have access to a private plane. He doesn't own a plane, doesn't have a pilot's license. He doesn't intend to flee. We have known about the existence of this investigation now for probably the better part of 3 or 4 months. It's been no secret that these accusations have been made. They've been swirling throughout social media, throughout his parents' church community. So had Thomas had the inclination to flee, he certainly wouldn't have waited until just a few days ago to exercise that intention. The truth of the matter is, Your Honor, that he respects this system of justice. He has faith in.
This channel is brought to you by askalawyer.com. So, for example, if you're an elderly woman and worried about the treatment that your grandson is doing as you're wasting away in the basement, trying to find out if you have a claim for elder abuse, what would you do? You go to askalawyer.com. Hey, Grandma, no, stop. Anyway, just kidding. She's not here. This is my office. So askalawyer.com actually is a very cheap and inexpensive way of trying to get a lawyer's opinion about your case or any kind of question you might have for a lawyer. So, for example, you might have an idea, would this be a good case to bring? Or somebody aggrieved me. Do I have, recompense? And so you can get an actual lawyer's opinion for $49. That's not bad. Or you can go to their AI component and do your own research that's trained on the 50 nifty United States laws and the federal laws. So go to askalawyer.com. They're a very loyal sponsor of the channel. Askalawyer.com. They're also the same people that brought you eForm and eSign. So what would happen here is they are talking to these girls, right? And they don't tell you that they're talking to these women. They're now women, but they were young girls at the time. And so you don't really know that's going on. Then all of a sudden, the law enforcement may reach out to you and try to take a statement from you. What's your version of this? And the first thing that you should do when that happens is call your lawyer. And so and then the lawyer would call the prosecutor, and any good lawyer wouldn't let you give a statement to the cops. Just wouldn't happen. Unless you were in Detroit when it happened in wherever this is, Licking County.
Our system and the citizens of this county to make a good, fair decision. And he's hired my firm to represent him throughout these proceedings. So he doesn't present a risk of flight. And further consideration of that contention, of that assertion, Your Honor, is that he stands before you with no record. He has a business. He's involved in production.
Production of what? He's a video producer. Here's the thing. If you like little girls way back then, you probably still like them now, is my guess. Try to get me to eat cranberries. I fucking hate cranberries. It's not my flavor. Don't like fucking cranberries. If I had cranberries at a Thanksgiving table, I throw up. I don't fucking like cranberries. But if your flavor is a flavor, it doesn't really change. I love roast beef. Older roast beef. But here's the thing. A guy like him, you go search his computer. Is there going to be child porn on his computer? Wouldn't doubt it for a fucking minute. Now, I don't know that there is. And there probably isn't a way, absent some other facts coming out, that they could get probable cause to go search his computer. But as part of the conditions of release, surrender all electronics, no internet, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden they surrender your electronics, and then now they can search your stuff because there's a court order. I've seen that happen before. I had a client who was ripping off the church. It was fucking another church guy. I've had a bunch of church cases. That's why my informed, and maybe I'm a little jaded because, guess what? When I see it, it's bad. But he was ripping off the church, and I think I've told the story before, and he was making fake bank statements to make it look like the church had money in the bank when he was just gambling it away. Well, guess what? And they knew it was fake because they went to the bank themselves. Not hard to figure that out, right? And so then they executed a search warrant on his computer to look for the bank statements. But guess what they found? Almost 7,000 images of child porn. If you would have just copped to the theft to begin with, instead of trying to cover it up, you would have done maybe a couple of years. But he wound up getting almost 15 years for the child porn. Mandatory minimum. See you later.
Movie production. He's married. He's gainfully employed. He's a property owner in Licking County.
I'm sorry. What county was that? And what's he charged with?
His parents, who are longtime members of this community, are also owners of property here. Both of those properties are available to be pledged should the court feel that's necessary. But I would submit to you, Your Honor, that what you haven't heard from the government is any reason as to why my client presents this as a risk of flight. And the reason you haven't heard that is because it doesn't exist. And Cliff and his office are very good prosecutors. If they had evidence, if they had any fact to...
The risk of flight comes from just the nature of the case, because it's just really, really serious. And you've got 27 counts. And guess what they can do with these counts? They can stack them up against each other. And that means consecutive, at least with respect to the victims. You've got 3 victims. You could stack all 3 of those, or you could stack all of them, consecutive. You've seen them do that with the, who's that gym coach or that, gymnastics doctor. Remember that doctor that had like 170 fucking counts and he was doing bad shit to everybody that came before him. I mean, and he went up getting, how many? I think he got like over 100 years or something. He just got an insane amount.
Any fact to present to you that says, hey, this gentleman is a risk of flight, you would have heard it. But there silence speaks volumes. And the reality is that there is no risk of flight. And next, I'd ask you to consider danger to the community. These are most certainly extremely serious charges. We take them seriously.
He promises he won't diddle another kid again. Your Honor, diddling kids is out for him. We're not going to do that anymore. Learn my lesson.
And in fact, the court is already aware, having reviewed the indictment, that I think count 17 or one of the counts might be a 25 to life. We had to go through the statutes, but I believe that the 2007 rape statute may carry 25 to life of a child under 13 but older than 10. So the stakes are certainly high. But I would also submit to you, Your Honor, that even if you were to assume for a minute that these counts had some validity past the fact that they were indicted by a grand jury, and we recognize how low that standard is. The last act, I believe, is alleged to have occurred in 2011. So we know from at least 2011 to 2025, my client has been doing nothing but working hard.
Or nobody's come forward yet in that time frame. I mean, just because we have from 2011 to 14 years where nobody's come forward yet, maybe they just haven't come forward. But if they do, he's fucking cooked.
And following the law. Not a single criminal charge has been levied against him because he hasn't committed any criminal acts. So the fact of the matter is, Judge, that you can safeguard the community.
Let's say in March. What happened in March? Well, in March, he wasn't indicted yet, right? So you could say from 2003 to 2025, he was crime-free.
With global positioning satellites, with restrictions on travel, surrender of passport, we believe is wholly appropriate. But I would submit to the court that an appearance bond in an amount that reflects not only my client's lack of flight risk, but also his lack of record and the presumption of innocence, and the incredible amount of time that has passed between 2011 and 2025, it is an extremely important consideration for the court. Additionally, Judge, without getting into the strength of the evidence, because I frankly don't know how strong the evidence is. But again, if you had some super compelling evidentiary positions or facts that the government was in possession of, such as his DNA is here, his confession, you would have heard that today, and you have not.
Somebody's oral test, and I love it when somebody comes to me and says, well, they don't have any evidence. They have witnesses who are talking. Oral testimony is evidence.
You to presume from that this is a case that will rest probably exclusively on witness testimony. And again, I'm not in a position to comment on whether it's strong or weak, but I can assure you, Your Honor, that my client presents no risk of danger, and he will follow scrupulously any order that you put on this case in terms of bail. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, the court's going to set a bond of $2 million jury without intent.
He set it at $2 million, so the state asked for $5 million, and the court set it at $2 million. So what does that mean for him? It means he's got to come up with $200,000 cash for a bondsman, and then he has to put up that amount in property to secure the bond, because you think they're going to just let you have a $2 million line of credit if you don't show up? Because guess who pays that? The bondsman pays that. So let's just take a quick look at the press conference that the state gave. You really can't make this up. A criminal sexual conduct case hosted out of Licking County.
Good afternoon, you folks ready? Good afternoon. I'm Licking County Sheriff Randy Thorpe, and here present with me today is Licking County Prosecutor Jenny Wells.
Good afternoon.
Captain Jay Cook, Captain Gus Moore, Chief Deputy Chad Dennis, and Chief Deputy Chris Barbudo. As many of you probably may be aware of, earlier today the Knox County Grand Jury returned a 27-count indictment.
So now when a jury returns an indictment, it's done in secret. So it's sealed until the defendant is arrested. So they don't tell you, oh, by the way, we're taking this to the grand jury. We'll see you once they indict you, and you can just turn yourself in. So they keep it sealed until they arrest the defendant.
Against Gary Thomas Keesee Jr. on various sex-related criminal offenses. I would just like to talk a little bit about the investigation, the process. Licking County received this case on February 7th. So over the period of a couple of months, these investigators worked hard, spoke to many.
You might wonder, it's 20-some years ago. Isn't the statute of limitations apply? Well, in a lot of jurisdictions, the statute of limitations doesn't apply doesn't start to run until it's reported. It's like 3 years after it's reported in some jurisdictions. In some jurisdictions, there is no statute of limitations. Like murder, there's no in every jurisdiction. In every jurisdiction, there is no statute of limitations for murder.
Various, I want to say, witnesses, victims, and the result is the indictments that were returned today. It's been a case that's drawn a lot of attention, but I just want to make sure everyone realizes that our focus is on the victims. That's what matters to us. The victims in this case, unfortunately, had to wait. It's my understanding that that there were victims that came forward as early as December. We received the case in February. There were a couple of agencies that looked at doing the investigation. They opted not to.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good afternoon. Thanks everybody for coming here today. I do want to commend the Licking County Sheriff's Office for their extensive investigation, which led to the case being presented today to the Knox County Grand Jury. They did a thorough investigation that took them to multiple states and led them to tracking down somewhere near 40 witnesses that they've interviewed. And this case is far from over at this point, but as the sheriff said, it was time for us to move forward with the information we had at this time and present the case.
So that means the investigation is ongoing and there may be additional victims.
So today the Knox County heard testimony and did return that 27 indictment that the sheriff spoke about, involving 3 victims of sexual abuse who have come forward. These courageous young women have spoken out and come forward, and they are to be commended for their bravery and supported. They're very serious charges that we've considered and the grand jury voted on: 11 counts of rape, 11 counts of gross sexual imposition, and 5 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. And as I indicated, that the investigation is still ongoing, and we simply would ask, and I'm asking on behalf of the Sheriff's Office as well, that anyone who has any information or anybody who has been a victim, that they still can come forward and share that information with law enforcement.
So if you get new allegations, does that mean that he has to go back and relitigate his bond? Possibly, because that's a change in circumstances. I mean, there's a 20-minute press conference, so I don't want to. Just gives you a flavor for what they're doing. So now what? So now you've got three now women making allegations that when they were children, under 13, that you did all this rotten shit to them. So what do? You have to look into their background. You got to do whatever you can in terms of a defense. And, it's easy from the state's perspective. Just get up and tell your story, right? I mean, you got 3 people. They're going to tell their story. And here's how they do it. This is what kills me about this. They'll get up and tell their story. Then the people who they told their story to, they get up and say, yeah, they told me their story, and this is what they said. It's what they call a prior consistent statement. And who are going to be the witnesses for the defense? I guess if you're saying that this never happened, then you have to have people to come in and question their credibility. You have to have people come in and say where you were when 22 years ago, all the way up to 2011. And they're very, very, very difficult cases, and you can see how entrenched in the community this church is. It sounds like it's more of a mainstream sort of evangelical type church. I don't know.
I'm a saint, I'm a sinner, I'm your soldier, I'm the killer, I'm a disease on the show, waiting to be aired.
And how embarrassing for the dad who's the leader of this church. He's the founder of the fucking church. So we'll follow this, but it's just, and it is something for these girls to come forward later. It just is. This is not easy for somebody to come and spill their guts and have their credibility challenged. I mean, granted, you're innocent until proven guilty. I get that. And I wholly support that. And the allegations have to withstand scrutiny in a court of law. But it is difficult for these. I mean, people don't like to talk about this stuff. I mean, who does? You know, I was a child. I felt violated. I felt blah, blah, blah. You know, I trusted him. You know, I thought he was my friend, and he had sex with me, and I was really confused. And now looking back on this really fucked me up. I don't trust anybody anymore. That's the kind of stuff that you hear with this. So my heart goes out to these 3 people who are making these allegations, and I hope there aren't any more, but you never know. And my heart goes out to his parents. I mean, fuck, they're dealing with a shitstorm. You know, I mean, church divided, house falls, right? It is what it is in Licking County. Fuck, I still can't get over that. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, I know who you are. Yeah, on the couch, you. Get off your ass and go subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, there's something wrong with you. Subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter. Go to CLRBruceRivers.com for your hats and hoodies and all the goodies. And make sure if you're going to sign up for Patreon, as a paid member, you will get a free hat sent to your location. And we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. 23-hour lockdown, police is at my God.